Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, one episode at a time, 7 days a week. And today, on technically the 18th, but I did watch the episode on the 17th of May, 2018. Sadly, something went wrong with the recording, and it didn't actually pick up my voice. Though this time, we are actually getting my voice. We are starting The Curse of Peladon with, The Curse of Peladon Episode 1, and The Curse of Peladon is a really solid story when you think about it. It starts off very, very good. You have the Doctor and Jo off of Earth for once, and we're on this is the second Pertwee story really to take place on a wholly other planet. This time we are on, the planet Peladon, where where we actually are dealing with the first instance of real-world politics bleeding into Doctor Who. This time, of course, being the questions over whether or not the Great Britain will join the European Union or not, which was a question in a lot of people's minds, something in the writers' minds. And Brian Hales, who wrote this episode, actually does a pretty good job at explaining why it would be a good thing, though he does sort of fail in mentioning any sort of cons. But again, when you're taking a side, you probably don't want to include as much cons. But also, what's also really good is that it doesn't necessarily just work for going into the European Union. It also, if you strip it of that context, you still have a really enjoyable story. Because, of course, you really don't necessarily... the best stories sort of transcend time and the time that they were made and the politics of the time and can still be enjoyed because of that. And you have... the way, really, Brian Hales does this is, he creates a bunch of interesting characters, mainly through who are all introduced in this episode, and that's really what this episode does. It's sort of a character introduction piece, which is kind of where it falls flat, because it doesn't necessarily introduce, the whole conflict, which is the whole idea of the curse of Peladon, that if Peladon lets people in, Agador, this giant beast, who has a bunch of statues and, I guess, a religion, devoted to him. If that happens, if Peladon goes into the Federation, then the religion will be valid and will no longer be valid, and Agador will curse everybody. And of course, the curse manifests itself with a one guy dying early on in the episode, and then at the very end, a statue falling on our protagonist. But really, oddly enough, you have the Doctor and Jo. This is really a character piece. You have to have the Doctor and Jo integrating themselves into the plot. You have the Doctor saying, I am the delegate from Earth, because the delegate from Earth hasn't actually shown up yet. And it would actually be funny if halfway through the story, the real delegate shows up, though this is 4 episodes, so I don't think they'll actually that will actually happen. I mean, for a fact, I know that doesn't happen. But the Doctor is there to help out, and it's funny is that he introduces Jo mainly because this whole idea is that only men of rank and women of royal blood can step foot in Peladon's throne room. So yeah, Jo's a princess now, which is sort of a role that Katie Manning plays excellently. She is really, really good as the Princess Josephine Grant of Earth. She really is eating up her chance to be regal and like a princess, which is something that, she doesn't always get the chance to do, but this time it really works. You have Jo, and she also already sort of gets this whole blooming relationship with the King Peladon, who is also a very well fleshed out character, especially for 70s Doctor Who. We already know that he's his mother. He misses his mother, who was an Earth woman who died, and then when his father died very young, he felt alone, and he didn't think he had the right to sit on the throne because it was rightfully his father's, not his. It wasn't his responsibility to be king. That the older men of his court have been the ones who are advising him through his entire life. It's something that it's a powerful sort of message for the king himself to be just an interesting character like that. It's not your average everyday story where the king is, just so fleshed out, and he's trying to be a good king, which is why he's holding this whole conference thing, because he thinks it'll be good for his people. He's just trying to do what's right. Of course, with the conference, you have to have delegates, and our first delegate are, of course, the Ice Warriors from Mars, because this is in the future. Like, this is not like Earth has gone out of the solar system. Like, humans have, like, I wouldn't want to say conquered, but pretty much probably conquered stuff. And it's something that. So obviously they've met the Ice Warriors who were on Mars, and they've made alliances with the Ice Warriors. But the Doctor is already initially wary. Like, you have the Ice Warriors there. This is something where it's sort of like, and it's interesting because the Doctor and Jo have this dynamic where Jo doesn't know the Ice Warriors, so she doesn't have to be as wary. And that's something that I'll get into in future episodes as the story develops. But yeah, they're there. We also have Arcturus, who is probably the least interesting of all of the delegates, mainly because he's a head in a jar. I mean, he's kind of warlike. I made a joke when I first recorded this that he's like Germany, which, yeah, but if he's Germany because he's warlike, he's like, well, we can defend ourselves. Then our final delegate, Alpha Centauri, a hermaphrodite hexapod, which is basically a penis in a shower curtain. Well, it's the one that steals the show, because Centauri is, well, he's sort of a complete pacifist and a little bit of a coward overall. Like, Alpha Centauri really doesn't do much, and it speaks with this high-pitched voice, and it's kind of a hilarious character. And again, I always find it funny because it's one of those things where the director thought, that looks a bit phallic. Let's put a cape on it and make it less phallic, when it actually, no, that makes it more phallic. Like, don't show this to your kids, people. They will probably snicker at Alpha Centauri's design. And, well, Alpha Centauri actually appears not only in this one, but also in the other Peladon story of the show, as well as in the new series, where for like 5 seconds, and they didn't update the design, which is actually quite funny. But also, the direction of this story is actually really good. Lenny Main is our director. He's a new director to the show. He hasn't really appeared before. He does a couple more of Pertwee stories, and then I'm pretty sure he does a couple of Toms. And he really helps with this atmosphere of that we're in an atmosphere of a medieval atmosphere, and that's really good. Really, the only problem is that, again, the plot really doesn't go anywhere in this first episode. It's really all exposition. So I'm going to give The Curse of Peladon, Episode 1, a 9 out of 10. All right, it is the 18th of May, 2018, and I actually just finished watching Curse of Peladon, Episode 2, after, of course, that sadness of Episode 1's footage being corrupted, but I'm pretty sure I recreated it, my points, point for point and everything. But Episode 2, the episode where we actually get a plot. And, well, that's kind of where the story seems to fall a little flat, at least in my eyes, because the plot just isn't very interesting. Like, it's... Part of it falls into a trap that actually a lot of Doctor Who stories with similar plots do, in that it wants to do an Agatha Christie-style murder mystery, or like, an Agatha Christie-style mystery. There isn't actually, well, there is a murder, but it's not necessarily the murder. It's also sort of like, what's behind Agador in this whole church? Because you have Hebesh, the high priest, who basically, like, he sends his big silent manservant Grun, who just sort of grunts and is kind of one of those characters that is just fondly remembered for just his weird gimmickiness. Like, it's something that Doctor Who's just, like, does a lot and has these weird gimmicks where you just have these grunting characters, like you have Toberman and Tomb of the Cybermen, and the guy from Terror of the Autons, who I do not remember, the strongman, played by the same actor, oddly enough. Oh, and Kemmel from Evil of the Daleks. Like, all of these, like, strongman characters who are just so hilariously weird and out of place that you really get them. But again, we have the characters. Like, this episode really works its way to have the Doctor and Jo try to discover the mystery. Like, as soon as the statue falls, the Doctor gets everyone out of the way. No one gets hurt. They call a quick meeting to try to be like this, and Jo actually sneaks off for a little bit. Like, she decides, okay, I'm sneaking off, and she finds a sort of sonic device, and it turns out it actually belongs to Ice Lord Ixlier. It runs, the Doctor explains, it runs on trisilicate, which, well, it's found on two places, on Mars and on Peladon. But here's the thing about Peladon is that Peladon can't be a suspect because he's the king. He would know about it, and he's obviously shown himself that he really doesn't want, he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He just wants what's best for his people. He's genuinely the archetypal good king. So the Doctor, of course, and the Doctor, having already gone through the Ice Warriors, the Seeds of Death, and Lords of the Red Planet, automatically suspects the Ice Warriors. Something that, well, let's be honest, is racist. Like, the Doctor has his expectations set in stone. No, they have a warlike tendency. They can't have change. He's sort of set in his ways. Whereas, again, Joe is the one who's saying, well, Doctor, I'm not convinced. Just because one weapon, how do you know that maybe it wasn't, stolen or something like that? There's no evidence for it. And then, the Doctor basically gets it out of her mind. And then Hales does the interesting thing. And then after that, he has Arcturus be nearly killed because Arcturus is I believe he lives off of nitrogen. Basically, an essential component, a circuit of Arcturus's life support system gets stolen, and the Doctor and Joe are the only ones there. The Doctor quickly tries to fix it. And then the Ice Warriors come in, and along with the other delegates, and this was, of course, they have the idea that, of course, the audience probably has by now. Well, this looks suspicious. You see, he's tampering. We don't know this delegate from Earth. He also showed up. He showed up where it just so happened that his credentials and all of their stuff crashed with their spaceship down the hill of the mountain. Because, of course, that happened in episode 1. I forgot to mention it, but yeah, that is sort of how the Doctor was able to really weasel his way, I guess, into power. Even though it's not real power, it's just he's a delegate. And you have this feeling that, hey, maybe the Doctor's also was the one that did it. I mean, of course, we know that they didn't because we're the audience, and we know that he's the protagonist of the show, that he would never do anything like that. Even though he's already actually shown genocidal tendencies towards the Ice Warriors. Hi, Seeds of Death. I remember you. You're a great story. But yeah, you have that, and the Doctor immediately accuses Lord Ixlir, and Ixlir accuses him right back. And even says, Centauri could also be a suspect. I know it's unlikely, but, Alpha Centauri still would have the technical know-how how to do it. You're basing this off of because I know how to do it, and because you're already kind of prejudiced against me. It's unspoken, but it's there. It's this interesting sort of subtext. In The Curse of Peladon. Again, weird. Doctor story from 1972. It's random. It's something that you really don't think would happen. And you have Joe. But what's interesting is that you have the Doctor immediately telling Joe not to sneak off. Now, I'll get back to that later, but we need to talk about Joe and Peladon, because you also have this interesting sort of romantic subplot between Joe and King Peladon, as Joe almost immediately understands where Peladon is coming from. He's been raised by these old men the rest of his life, and he's always been raised into royalty, so he sort of has that problem of not having any real friends, just sort of being surrounded by, yes men. He desires to have some sort of a human relationship, and of course he puts those feelings on Joe, because she's the first person around his age, because he's supposed to be a young king. Oddly enough, played by Patrick Troughton's son, David Troughton. But yeah, he's a young age, and he wants a friend, but he doesn't quite have the social skills to do it. He ends up screwing his chances with Joe because he makes her think that he just wants her for political gain, it's a very nuanced portrayal between the both of them, as Joe obviously sympathizes with Peladon, but also Joe refuses to be used, which is something that most fans never quite pick up on, because people always hear Jo Grant, and they see her as sort of the dippy, dumb companion that she sort of was in Day of the Daleks. It's weird, a lot of the problems of a lot of weird fan conceptions can be traced back to Day of the Daleks, which I did not like. But yeah, that is just, it's an amazing scene. It's moments like this that really give the story flavor. But of course, back to Joe sneaking off. Well, she sneaks off, sneaks into the delegates' room, starts, of course, with the Ice Warriors, probably just because we don't have time to search Centauri's room. And lo and behold, she finds the circuit. Because she knew what she was looking for, she finds it. The Ice Warrior comes in, she hides behind a curtain, gets caught because, curtains don't hide your feet. Like, that doesn't work like that. So, of course, she gets caught. The Ice Warrior locks her and goes to tell Ixalir. And that's when we sort of have the real conflict of, well, it could, because again, it's coming at it from a bunch of different viewpoints. The Doctor has history with the Ice Warriors, knowing that they have had tendencies to be evil in the past. So he automatically suspects them. They suspect him, partially because, one, they suspect him, but also he didn't have his credentials, and, he was alone with everything, and he barely sent Joe. But also you have Lord Hepesh, who is, of course, at least behind the Agador stuff. I don't think he might not be behind the circus, because, well, they're technologically advanced. Though, a little interesting revelation is that Arcturus wouldn't have actually died, because, if they really it may have knocked him out, but they could have brought him and put him into a dormant state. But they could have brought him back with, again, the Doctor's rewinding. So something bigger is also going on here. Joe also climbs out a window, which is great. Again, it's building up a bunch of these threads of people double crossing. Like I remember Adventures with the Wife in Space, basically describing the story as Game of Thrones, but with less incest, I think. Or was it with more incest? I don't quite remember. But yeah, again, it's an amazing continuation. My only problem is that it's a bit slow. The cliffhanger isn't the best cliffhanger, mainly because it's there are points where it's like, are we cliffhanger? No, we're still going a little bit. Oh, cliffhanger? No, we're still going until we get to the final cliffhanger, which is just too many cliffhangers. That's it. So I'm going to give The Curse of Peladon, Episode 2, again, a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 18th of May, 2018 again, and I just finished watching Episode 3 of The Curse of Peladon, and this one, it's a great episode. It's a good episode again, but a really good episode again. But I feel like this one isn't quite as good as the previous ones, because, well, this one is the episode that sort of addresses the criticisms of the political satire. It also falls victim to the standard third episode padding, which is kind of a problem for a large number of Doctor Who stories, especially 4-part Doctor Who's, especially the 4 and 6-part Doctor Who stories in particular, where Episode 3 or Episode 5 just feels a bit more padded. Of course, the Doctor has his sentence of death, and Joe immediately tries to plead with the King to you're the King, you're in charge. It doesn't matter that this is tradition. You should still be able to change things, and it's something that's done really, really well. You have Joe pleading with the guy because she doesn't want to see the Doctor killed. The Doctor is her ride home, and they are close friends. She's his assistant and his friend. That's sort of the relationship that they have. It's just a matter of the fact that the King is kind of, he's sort of completely held to the traditions of the world. Like, he doesn't get his own, he doesn't get to make his own decisions. It's that, he still sort of has Hepesh as, as someone that's there to watch over him and make sure that he continues to be king, essentially in the way that they want him to be king, not necessarily in the way that he wants. He wants to change things. We get this great scene between the King and Joe, where Joe basically says, it's your kingdom, and the King basically says, it's my mother tried to teach me about justice and compassion and the way things are done on Earth. Sort of implying that Earth is almost like a perfect standard to live up to now at this point in the future, where justice prevails, which is always interesting. For a future is always optimistic. I love the optimisticness of having a future, but but again, it's Earth. It is. I mean, it's Earth that he wants to live up to. Yeah, he still refuses to actually, step in and help with everything. Like it's like he's the one who, um, he's the one who has all the power, but he doesn't. And Joe just lets him have all of her anger. And Katie Manning gives an amazing performance in this episode as she just gets the anger out there, and it's one of those things that it's those things that things just happen. Joe's just she lets him have it, and and then he immediately proposes marriage, and he tries to admit that he tries to keep them separate, but again, you have this great bit where he doesn't know how to be a real, genuine person, so to speak. Like he is, really, he is really one of those, characters, he's one of those characters who just, he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He's trapped in this world, and he's interesting. So, and you sort of have Habash, who goes to the doctor and offers him his freedom, and you for a moment you think, well, maybe, because maybe he isn't actually the one behind all of this, and of course that's actually almost immediately destroyed because he tells Gron, like, no, we're just trying to get the doctor. We just made the doctor fake map and a fake escape route, just so that he could essentially be told, um, hey, yeah, so I'm actually not, um, I'm not. I don't. I'm not evil. When it's like, no, you're the one who's, you're the one who's got, all the problems. You don't have the choice. You're just one of the, you just have the problem of, you're the one who's gonna cause all the problems, and it doesn't matter what we think. You're evil, essentially. It's one of those things that, um, it's, um, the doctor doesn't get his happy ending, and he's like, a large chunk of this episode is, the doctor fighting Grun to the death. The doctor beats Grun, but refuses to kill him, and then Arcturus and the Ice Warrior, not Isla, but like, I cannot remember. I think the other Ice Warrior's name is Zor. But the other Ice Warrior goes ahead and, well, the other Ice Warrior's name is Sorg, and he also shoots. So that's our cliffhanger. It's a really, it's a really good, that, that we have, the episode. This episode does some really good things, though. Like, it has the doctor, essentially get to figure out that Agador isn't a beast, and he sings a Venusian lullaby to it, and the Venusian lullaby from, the Venusian lullaby from, first introduced in the Demons, 2 stories ago, and it calms him. And even though Joe screws up, but like it builds up the idea that, yeah, Agador, that Agador isn't actually evil. So that he's actually, one of, he's not evil. um, he's got, he's, just an animal. Like, he can be tamed. He's like a dog. He can easily, uh, easily be, tamed like a dog was. So, um, um, so you have, uh, to have, you have to have the story like that. And then what happens with that the, um, is that then, um, they also have really the delegates sort of showing themselves like Centauri still shows shows itself to be quite an idiot, like ready to leave. But again, Arcturus immediately is like, the Ice Warriors must be into this because they are, um, they are the ones who have, they're the ones who have, everything going on. So it must be, and then of course, Ixler and even Joe sort of calls him out on this. Like, no, that's not what they want happening. Like, no, they want, um, they want everything to work correctly. Like, they want to go through everything. It's just, it really is a nuanced portrayal that sort of makes it official that, um, that really that the entire whole Ice Warriors plot, well, that they aren't evil. Like, they, um, they're pretty good. So, so much so, like, outside of that, we just have the padding, which is a problem. So I'm going to give Curse of Peladon episode 3, episode 3, a, uh, a 7 out of 10. Alright, it is the 19th of May 2018, and I just finished watching episode 4 of The Curse of Peladon. This is the final episode of the story, and, well, as an episode, it just feels superfluous. Like, okay, there's some really good things here. You have the Doctor and Joe still being the Doctor and Joe. Joe still actually figuring out that she really doesn't have feelings for the king because mainly she doesn't know him very well. She makes her decision. Yes, she is given the option to leave the Doctor, and she doesn't take it. She says, "No, I'm gonna keep with you. We're gonna keep going just because they care for each other, and they're characters who have their own sort of way about things. Like, they know that we're in it together for the long haul. So please, so we aren't going to be parting. But a lot of this is superfluous because, of course, the whole idea is that it's revealed Arcturus is dead. That's what we're shooting. Arcturus dies, and it's really just we need to convince Hephaestus that everything's okay. And that just takes 25 minutes. It's a bit superfluous. Like, they try to add a little. Brian House tries to add some tension with the idea that, like, all the communicators for the spaceships broke and stopped working. They were all sabotaged, including, of course, Earth's communicator. But that really doesn't add any tension to the story because we've already got the idea that, hey, things are going down. Like, okay, so they just sort of have to get Arcturus dead, and then, they have to get Hepesh, and they capture Hepesh. They reveal that Hepesh had actually been keeping an Agador that happened to survive, and it turns out it's more like a guard dog, and it really likes the Doctor, and it's kind of cute. It's a cute costume. It's played by a guy in a costume, obviously, but that's really all there is to this episode. It's not. There isn't nearly as much for me to go into as the other 3 episodes, which had just these strong themes and everything. Like, you just sort of finish everything. there really is some interesting world building, that it turns out that Mars also has this rivalry with the planet Arcturus, which is why Arcturus wanted to frame the Ice Warriors so much. Which that's interesting. Also interesting that like Arcturus would have a race, and how Mars would have some sort of a stake in that planet, because well, Arcturus obviously as a planet is obviously not your standard atmosphere, because well, as you can see by the design of Arcturus himself, like it's a head in a jar, and that's life support. There also mentions something about Alpha Centauri, who is sort of reveals itself to be sort of the timid one, I guess, of the delegates. Like he's the one who's like, no, 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 I refuse to stick my neck out on the line, even though it could save everything. Like, no, 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 we aren't sticking my neck out at all. I am until like since Joe actually convinces it that no, you really should help the doctor, because the doctor needs help. Like that's sort of Alpha Centauri's role, I guess, in this episode, and that pads out the runtime a little bit. It's an enjoyable episode. To get me wrong, it's just as an episode, it doesn't really do too terribly much. Like it's just sort of, well, we've got nowhere else to go with this, so this is sort of what we're doing, and well, you may as well enjoy it if you must. Or not, we don't really care. We just wrote the thing to be finished. So yeah, it's probably the story would have gone better if maybe they could have cut it down to 3 episodes, because this episode just, it seems really superfluous. It's a decent episode, so I'm going to give The Curse of Peladon episode 4 a 6 out of 10. That being said, we of course have finished the story, so we add up all the scores and average them out to give The Curse of Peladon a final score of 7.75 out of 10. Thank you everybody for watching, of course, this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Even though we went longer than most of the 4-part episodes do, that's okay. There was a lot to analyze in this. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next time when we continue to tackle the next John Pertwee televised story with The Sea Devils.